So welcome, Bhakti, to the longer form of this, conversation that we're having. So we've had, for those who are listening for the first time, so Bhakti is from Hong Kong, and very interesting name. Bhakti is a very interesting name. Uh, she's from Hong Kong. She is a banker turned author turned, I think, also now a coach. She's a bibliotherapist, which I will ask her what it is about. She has a master's in creative writing, and I think has published more than 5 books, huh? If I get it right.
19.
Oh, yeah, better than five.
Uh,
Oh, fantastic. So, thanks, Bhakti, for joining in and gracing your time with us and all the listeners and viewers. So, thank you for coming along. And I know it's in the evening for you in Hong Kong, and you're ahead of our times.
Thank you, Pungi. That's very wisely said. No, it's a pleasure, and I'm delighted to be here on your show.
Fantastic. So I see a lot of books behind you. So what's your favorite book? So I think that's the most cliched question I ask an author, but I
Uh,
do that anyways.
So a few come to mind, but there are some books that I like to read every year. So one of them is called Siddhartha by
Mhm.
Hermann Hesse. I don't know if you've read it, but it's really the story of this gentleman based in India at the time of Gautam Buddha, who wanted to find liberation. And he followed the Buddha's path for a while. He followed another spiritual leader's path for a while. And why I love this book is because Herman Hesse has brought this out so beautifully that we have to carve our own path at the end of the day of what spirituality means for us and how we are going to find it, how it manifests in our life. So there is no formula of following anybody. And eventually, after following these masters, he comes to cross the river, and there is a boatman who ferries him across. And he learns the secrets of life from the simple ferryman at the end.
Mhm.
Is what really struck me, and it's a book that I go back to very often. The other book that I really enjoy is a book by Viktor Frankl. It's called Man's Search for
That's the
Meaning.
meaning.
And you must have read that. And it's about Viktor Frankl, who was a psychotherapist, his experiences in the Nazi concentration camp. And one of the most beautiful things that I learned from the book is it is our responsibility to find meaning in life, because finding meaning in life makes our life more joyful. So the whole question of is there any meaning to life, I think that's a moot point. And the point really is to find meaning to make life a much more enriching and exciting experience.
Mm, absolutely. I think two very fascinating books. So I haven't read Siddhartha. I've read Man's Search for Meaning. It's a fantastic book. I think that Tuesdays with Maury was another one that was absolutely fascinating to read, to maybe also sort of inculcate some of the things that we read. So that also was something there. But Siddhartha is something that's new, and the way you shared it, I think it makes me now want to look at it. So also, yeah, I think it's also about the way you tell stories, right? So a story can be about facts and figures, can be about imagination and all that. So what's your way of writing stories?
It's a good question. So when I started the Amma Tell Me CDs, which is on Hindu mythology for young kids, really in the 2 to 8 year old age group, and I was sharing with you earlier, the inspiration was my own kids when they were young. I wanted to bring Hindu mythology to life in a way that was fun, exciting, and not preachy. So as a
Mm.
child, I remember reading books on mythology and history, but they were very didactic, and they were very do this, you're good, and this is bad. And that didn't interest me at all. So I wanted to write it in a way which would be engaging, where a child would want to know. And as I started writing it, I realized that it's a great parenting tool, because where else can you show the consequences of actions? So when my kids were small, and I found that if I told them, don't do this, this is bad, or do this, this is good, they would roll their eyes at me saying, their Amma goes again. preaching. But if I told them, for example, that Ravan did this, this was the consequence, or these are the choices that Vibhishan made, these are the choices that Hanuman made, and this is what happened as a result, they see a character, they see the qualities, and they see the consequences. So it's a fantastic parenting tool where you're not preaching, it's almost you're showing them without really telling them. So that was sort of the thought process behind writing that. The second series, which is Amma Take Me, which is to places in India, that is a travelogue of a mother and her two slightly older boys between, say, 9 to 12 years old. And the way I've written that is, again, instead of being boring, so there's a book on Taj Mahal. So instead of just giving the facts and the figures, why it was made and which year, I've told it as it happened with us, which is when we visited it. And I've used the questions that my children asked me all through as we
Mm.
walked along the monument and the answers I actually gave them. So they were a little annoyed because every time they'd ask me a question, I'd start writing it down. So they started bribing me with video games by then. Where they're like, yeah, we know you're using this as research for your book. But the whole idea is to make it very real. And my wish is that anyone who wants to go, any child, parent, grandparent, because the book is equally for adults, would become a go-to book. These books would become go-to books. So that was the objective behind the second series.
Fantastic. So, you said masters around creative writing. So, what made you want to do that? Because as a fellow writer myself, I don't know that something like that exists.
Uh, So I started writing Amma Tell Me series. I didn't have any formal education in writing other than the odd journal entries and poetry that I've written over the years. And the more I started reading about the art of writing, I realized it's a craft. And like anything else, sort of the more you do, the better you get at it. And also, to in coaching parlance, like mentoring, how much mentoring helps us when you're given the right pointers and the right skills to develop. In the same way, there are certain skill sets one can develop when one is taught. And that encouraged me to apply to Hong Kong University. Like you said, I'm in Hong Kong, and they luckily had a program for working people. So the classes were held on weekends. And that time I was in banking, so it worked for me very well. We had a fantastic faculty. A lot of the people who taught us were people who were in the process of writing, who had been published. So it was very much real world. What I really got out of it, Pungi, was a cohort of people who were writing.
Mm.
And we formed a writing group, and we'd have these writing critique sessions, we would call it, where each of us would write 2,000 words once a week or once every 2 weeks. And then we would critique each other's work. And that gave me extremely valuable feedback because sometimes we become so married to our work that we are not able to look at it objectively anymore.
Mm.
So we miss the good, but we also miss what needs improving. And this really helped me because this was the time that I had started writing with Penguin. So the book on Golden Temple and Tirupati was really informed by the feedback I got from my fellow students. And it was very exciting for me because most of the students were Chinese, and they were fascinated to learn about Indian culture, history, Sikhism, about this Balaji, this temple, this god who's standing on top of a hill. And so that process was also very rewarding to see that I've been able to inform them in some way about the richness of our culture and our heritage.
Wow. I think that there is so richness in culture and heritage, and I'm sure that you are very proud of the fact that through these stories, through more and more people listening to it, sorry, reading it, there's some space of propagation of stories that all of us have listened to and all of us have been inspired by. It feels it has a different feeling, I think, when something like that happens.
It is, and it makes me realize another thing that a good story cuts across culture and countries.
Absolutely, yeah. And a good story absolutely does that. And what makes a good story? I think that's an in the moment question. What makes a good story?
I think what makes a good story is when people are able to connect at some level. And I think people connect with vulnerability. So if you have characters where you can show how they're feeling and what they're going through and how they come out at the end, I think that makes a good story. And I have been very fortunate in that regard that I write about mythology. So there are millions of gods and goddesses in India. So I have these ready made stories already. I've been bringing them to children in my own way.
Wow.
So, to that extent,
That-
I've been extremely lucky because of the richness of our mythology and the richness of the historical monuments in India and places of spiritual significance.
Wow, amazing. So I think I've had a lot of uh, insight into some of the ways in which you write stories. But how was it when you were first holding on to your first book, or whatever first story that you sort of had a encounter with?
So, the first book I wrote was Amma Tell Me About Holi. In fact, I have a copy here. And
Oh wow.
I I was very intrigued by Dr. Seuss because I was telling you earlier, my mother was a librarian. So I spent many hours in the library. I think library are inexpensive and entertaining babysitters. So my mother would leave me in the morning and then pick me up in the evening to a children's library, which was right next to the library she worked in. And one of the books I remember being read, my mother reading to me sitting on her lap, is Horton Hears a Who by Dr. Seuss. I was fascinated with that book, and it's written in rhyme. So when I began writing Amma Tell Me About Holi, my whole idea was to write it in rhyme. I didn't realize at that time that I had just made my job a lot harder because of the rhythm and the meter. And I struggled a lot with that. But I think over time, hopefully with 14 books in the series now, it's gotten better. But I thought rhyme would be fun for children because when I would read it as a child and the words would roll off my tongue, I found it extremely exciting and it had encouraged me to read. So that was my tryst with the first book. When I started writing Amma Take Me, and that is sort of longer books, it's in verse. That was a different challenge because I'd gotten so used to writing in rhyme for a younger audience, and then how do you move from there to capture the interest of middle graders who are sort of growing up now? And unlike children where the parents buy the books and you read it together and they're much more open to it, I think middle graders become a lot more discerning readers. They want to read things that they like. And then to introduce something like Tirupati or Golden Temple or Shirdi to them, I felt it had to really come from a place where they could relate to it, which
Hmm.
is where my two boys who were young at that time, their questions really helped me.
So who helped you write the book is as much you as your kids.
Yes, in fact, they have been they have been my first editors, and they have been my guinea pigs. So when I was writing Amma Tell Me About Holi, this series, I would call them and make them sit in front of me, and I'd start reading the story in
Hmm.
rhyme, and suddenly I would see they've disappeared. And children are very direct. So then I realized, oh, this is not holding their attention. So they've run away. Then I would go make changes. And at other times when I would read it, they would be riveted. They would be looking at me like this. And then I'd realize, okay, I'm on the right path.
You got the secret sauce. Oh, fantastic. So, yeah, I think there's much to be covered in terms of some of the aspects that you have. So you banker, then coach, then author. We've come to that space, and bibliotherapist. So, how do you like to sort of navigate all that in terms of sharing your experience with that?
In terms of time management.
No, in terms of explaining it to our viewers, saying how did that transition happen? So, uh, That, and also maybe, even I think a little bit about bibliotherapy, because I think that's very new for
Yeah.
me and hopefully for others as well. So,
So banking was something I had done for many years. It was my career. And writing happened very organically because it was for the children. And as every festival started coming, I kept writing a book. And that's how the series really grew. I also started writing for the newspaper in Hong Kong as a freelancer on health and fitness, on people who'd had huge transformations by making mental shifts, taking things in their hand, taking charge of their health. So that journey flowed quite well. Bibliotherapy happened because of a book called The Novel Cure, which was gifted by a friend to me, written by two bibliotherapists. And it lists about 150 ailments from heartache to headache to being empty nesters to aging. And it gives a prescription or a cure in the form of a book. And it has some 700 book recommendations and why that book should be read for that particular ailment. So I was fascinated. And I myself then did a bibliotherapy session with Ella Bathur, who's one of the authors of the book. I have always been an avid reader. Since I was a little girl, I have been self medicating myself with books. I was the only child, and for every problem I faced, I would turn to a book. This reading this book on bibliotherapy, having a bibliotherapy session, it inspired me to become a bibliotherapist myself. And I found there are some benefits of literature which nothing can replace. The biggest one I found is that when I read fiction, I realize that every problem that I have or have had, somebody else has had it already and it's been written about. So the big thing is it makes me feel I am not alone. It distracts me, it takes me away from the world I am in. Many times, books have also given me a different perspective. It has made me look at my problems as a third party in a more objective way. Because when you see a character going through something similar that you are going through, you are able to put that distance between yourself and the problem because you're seeing it happen to a character. And it's putting that distance that actually brings the
yes,
clarity.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
that has been those are the big benefits. Other than that, it is known that reading for just 6 minutes a day, it slows your heart rate, lowers the blood pressure, it gives you the same benefits as meditation. So when we hold a book and we are sort of going like this, we are reading the words, that function of reading the words and going to the line itself produces chemicals in the brain, which is extremely relaxing.
Mm,
So there are actual physical benefits that happen, hormones that are released that relax us, along with these other benefits of making us realize that we are not alone. And there, there are various books that talk about the benefits of reading, and there are various TED Talks as well. There is a TED Talk by a lady called Rita Carter saying why reading matters, and I would encourage everyone to listen to that TED Talk, where she talks about scientists actually studying the brain and noticing, making people read passages from a book, and then what they noticed was the same parts of the brain light up as if you were actually having the experience, as if you were
mhm,
actually going through it. So it lights up to a lesser intensity, of course, than if you were really going through the experience, but they light up quite a bit. And that, she says, is the main benefit. It makes you more compassionate, it makes you more empathetic. And most importantly, it's like a brainwash, literally like a shampoo for the brain, because reading fiction, that whole act of reading is actually strengthening and opening your neural pathways.
mm.
So it makes your brain a lot more healthier.
Wow, fantastic. And no, very interesting, because I haven't heard of something like this for some time, and because my mind's already racing, and possibly how can I position my books in terms of putting it out there in terms of therapy. But I do use writing and quite a few of say, enabling writing for the other side as part of what I do in terms of coaching. And I'm also curious, so how did coaching happen? Did you quit banking to get into coaching, or no, it happened organically? How did this happen?
So I left banking mainly to spend more time with my children and focus on my writing. And I knew someone at that time who had begun coaching, and they offered me a session, and I went into it very unhappily because I said my idea of coaching was so different. I said, my God, I'm going to be told what to do about a problem. Advice is going to be given to me. And I just didn't like that feeling. I thought, my God, someone's going to judge me. But because it was a friend and I didn't want to disappoint them, I went through the session, and I'm so glad I did because it opened up a whole new world for me. At the end of that 45 minutes or 1 hour pungi, I realized that no advice had been given to me. I had been asked questions that made me think. What I had said had been reflected back to me in a way that made me rethink the way I was thinking about them. And I realized I got clarity and answers on my own. And it was a very empowering process where I felt someone was with me, but they weren't telling me what to do. They
Yeah.
were they they were creating that safe space for me to explore my feelings. And because it had such an impact on me, I decided to undergo a coaching program myself. It was mainly to develop myself for my own self development. When I did the course, I didn't know how I would use it. So I didn't do it particularly to become a coach. But after that, I was very lucky to get work on the executive coaching side with banks and MNCs. And I've been very grateful for that. So that's how that journey has progressed. And now I work with clients globally.
Wow, fantastic. And how's your experience working with women leaders?
It's been very enriching. Every time that I have coached, I find that the biggest beneficiary has been myself, because every problem that a client has discussed or any issue they're struggling with, I find that I've struggled with it in degrees at some point or the other. And many times, and I'm sure I'll be curious to hear your views on this as well, I feel many times myself being reflected back in the issues that they have. And it helps me grow because after the sessions, I read more about the subject, I'll see TED Talks, I'll send them some homework or some things to do. And in that process, my understanding of the topic deepens. And I feel the biggest thing it has done for me is it has made me reduce my judgments.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel I have stopped judging. And that is reflected in my personal relationships. It's reflected in the way I parent, at least I hope, and in relationship with close friends, with my spouse. So I think it's been the biggest benefit has been the way it's transformed me.
Yeah, I think absolutely. So we grow as individuals, we grow as persons, our personality undergoes a shift. So there are multiple aspects around coaching that essentially is a very spiritual journey as and how we take it. So we keep moving, we keep getting better, we keep getting challenged. And I think we're also meeting new people. I think I am fascinated by it because I meet new people. I meet people like you, and podcasts like this come forth. So I'm very excited about this. And also, as much as it is about the process, the entirety, it's somewhere also seeing somebody transform their life and to have such a close seat to the transformation. I think that's very exhilarating. And
And
that
also
that's what's yeah.
the word you used, I wanted to highlight spiritual. That's absolutely right. It is a journey of going inwards, and I feel going back to the real self.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's unonionizing certain things, and you're peeling more layers, and then you get to that core of who you are through this process, because you're also enabling that through the other side as well. So as much as you ask those questions to them in terms of enabling their awareness, somewhere you're also putting that question to yourself, saying, what's holding me back? What would I like to feel at the end of the session? So, our thoughts are also like that. And somewhere we also have, like I said, how you're self-medicating with books. Somewhere we are also self-coaching ourselves to a certain extent, and we get better. Yeah.
That-
So that's the aspect.
That's a great analogy that you gave of the onion and peeling the layers. Yeah.
I think, yeah. Because it is somewhere like that. So we are slowly getting to the core of who we are. And in some of the workshops that I do, one of the questions I ask them is, describe who you are, and don't use any of these, banker, writer, none of the roles or titles or positions saying, describe yourself now. And it's
Yeah.
very transformative for anybody who's doing it. I don't know if you are game for that question right now.
Yes, I can actually, because this is something that something I think about sometimes. And the answer that comes to me is really I see myself as an eternal student. That's how I see myself, someone who is on a path of wanting to learn and to grow. And I think I'll always think of myself as a student, as a lifelong learner. So there was a seminar I did many years back by a person called Tony Robbins. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Mhm.
He does these self-development courses, leadership seminars, and he introduced a concept of can I, and it was constant and never-ending improvement, and that really struck me. And I think that was the genesis, the start of my journey of going inward and trying to develop more as a human being. And it still is. I'm still in kindergarten. There's such a long way to go, but I
Mm.
feel happy to be on the path. So yeah, that's how I would define who I am.
So eternal learner, uh,
It,
also the space of can I, and see what comes from that. Very, very interesting. Hmm. So what would be a question that you would like to ask me next? Sorry, me to ask you next.
what would you like? What would I like you to ask me next? I think one of the things that has been a big part of my life over the last 5 years has been yoga.
I
And
see it in the background as well.
yes, so I practice Iyengar yoga. I was lucky to be introduced to it by a friend, and I'm training to be a Iyengar yoga teacher. That journey has been extremely significant for me. It has changed many things and taught me a lot about myself. And one of the things that I've learned, which Mr. Iyengar used to say, is the mind has to be accessed by the body and the breath. The mind cannot be accessed by the mind. So, this is again something for all the young women who be listening. I would recommend that they start Iyengar yoga. It is such a rewarding journey. The biggest change I find that it's made is it's given me this sense of wholeness where I'm not looking at other people or other
Mhm.
things to fill or complete myself or for validation. And that is because of the link between the asanas that you do, the pranayam, where it takes you, and the impact that it actually has on quietening the brain.
Mhm. Very interesting.
So, yes, that
Mm.
is something that I wanted to talk about because of the way it has changed me.
Mm. Wow, very interesting. And it's a different form of yoga, or what makes that different?
So, all yoga is actually the same. I think people use different names, but if you look at it, what Patanjali has given as the eight limbs of yoga, they remain the same. This was started by a person named BKS Iyengar, and his students started calling it Iyengar yoga after
Mhm.
him. And there are certain things which are particular to Iyengar yoga in terms of the alignment, the sequencing, the timing. But I think the biggest benefit or the biggest contribution that Mr. Iyengar has made is that he was a sickly child and his teacher was his brother-in-law, and he was told that he needed to practice yoga, otherwise he might not survive. So he used his body actually as an instrument to learn and to figure out the asanas and how it should be done and how it would impact us. So I feel that the work of decades he has synthesized through his life's work. And that has been the biggest contribution. It's extremely scientific, and he has preserved that knowledge. That knowledge has been documented. There's a very vibrant community of Iyengar yoga teachers and practitioners that should be accessed into. So I think that is really the speciality.
Hmm. Very interesting. And to put somebody's body through for decades and learn from that, I think it's wonderful that the name has been uh, immortalized in the yoga aspect. Because that's something that I found when you were explaining in terms of him being a sickly child and then using his body to make it happen, and how many of them are getting benefited through this. And it
Yes, and
sometimes brings it back. Yeah.
and what a fantastic legacy. He passed away in 2014. And what a legacy to continue, and what a gift to give. Yoga always has been there. And that also tells me that India is so rich culturally, spiritually, but it has to be understood and then presented in a form that can be accessed and used by people in their daily life. Otherwise, if that knowledge is there and not being used, it's as good as it not being there. I think that has been his big gift of
Mm.
making it accessible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of gifts, what would be a gift that you would like to give our young, say, authors who may be listening to this? So, any tidbits, advice in terms of writing? I know if I am given advice, the first advice people will give me is do another level of editing. But I am of the space that whatever comes from the cosmos is already perfect. So possibly only spelling mistakes is what I correct. But yeah, advice from you.
So, a few things that I've learned in the journey, and it's still a learning process, is write what you're passionate about. It doesn't matter if there are 100 books on the subject out there. What you comes from a place of passion, from a place of feeling, nothing can substitute that. That to get better at something, you have to do more of it. So you want to become a better writer, write more. Just like if we want to become fitter, we will go to the gym more, or we will have a better diet plan, or we want to become better at tennis, we will spend more hours there. It's the same thing. Write more. Then to become a better writer, read more. You will find readers whose styles you like, and it is fine to be inspired by people and to start by, I would say, not I don't mean to say really copying, but even taking inspiration and emulating and beginning somewhere till you find your own style.
Absolutely.
So, and also there are so many resources there. Use those resources, join critique groups, get feedback, find mentors, but continuously work at writing and at improving, and be ready to keep tweaking. Okay,
Yeah,
if this strategy doesn't work, move to another strategy. So I think those are the few things that I would advise.
yeah. No, I think then it sort of gets me into this say naughty question in terms of what's your thoughts on ChatGPT or AI taking over writing? Controversial question at the end.
I know. Well, it is. And it's a very interesting question you've asked. I don't have enough data points, and I haven't used ChatGPT very widely. I have gone on it. I still feel that an individual's creative voice, which comes from their own life experiences and their own struggles, that can't be replaced by anything.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
ChatGPT may produce something of a very superior quality, but I feel the pain that a person has gone through, and you're a poet, Pungi, the pain that you would bring out in your poetry from your life experiences. I find it hard to believe that I would feel the same pain written by, AI. I may be wrong, but this is what I feel now.
Yeah, I think so. The aspect around AI is that, say, when AI delivers something, so it's been trained by billions of poets. So there is that space of quality. But how many ever times somebody's written the alphabet, the first time a kid writes their own alphabet or writes it on their own, I think that feeling will never ever be replaced. So that's my only answer to anybody asking me this, saying, does AI take over the world of writing? Maybe it does take over the world of writing in terms of how much money we're going to make, what's the quality of writing, the jobs that, say, content creators or somebody else may take over. But it can never take away that space where you find your own joy in writing. Whatever gibberish you write, whatever quality you write, when you write it, it's yours. And that ChatGPT can never take away.
Actually, that's a very valid point you make. And I was thinking of that because, of course, we write so that others read our work, but I think we primarily write to heal ourselves.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that is really the main purpose. It's therapeutic for us and it gives a certain satisfaction to people, even if something is not published, even if it's
Absolutely.
somebody who's journaling regularly. The benefit really is in that process of writing. And that itself is its biggest reward.
Absolutely. It's so much of joy. It's that joy of writing something, even if it is 2 lines, 3 lines, is unparalleled. Mm.
Yes.
So, Bhakti, we're almost on top of our time. It's been almost an hour talking to you, and I feel that, time's just simply flown by. And thank you for introducing your world to our readers and our listeners, your books, your Bibilotherapy, Aer Yoga. And I'm sure there is going to be more sometime whenever we come back on a podcast again. But if you want to share something as a closing remark, I'd be happy to let the floor be yours.
Oh, that's very kind of you. No, really, it's been a delight and a pleasure to speak to you about what I've been doing and my life's journey. And my in the closing, I'd only like to tell people be bold, think big, don't have any what ifs, and just go ahead and do it, whatever it is.
Wow, don't have any what ifs. I think it's a fantastic tagline for the YouTube
Yeah.
link. Don't have that. So fantastic. So thanks, Bhakti. Thanks for making it. And yeah, there'll be more podcasts. There'll be more conversations with you. And very
Thank you.
happy to have this conversation with you. See you then. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for inviting me. You.
See you.